Mike, thanks for joining us today.
Pleasure to be here, thank you.
Fathom's a new tech platform that's really kicking goals and helping corporates, governments and policymakers navigate the fourth industrial revolution. Could you share with us a little bit about your story and what the platform does?
Sure. So over the last few years, I've seen the impact of emerging technologies firsthand in industries in countries all over the world, particularly in Asia, but also Europe and North America. I started to see a pattern emerge, which is that when companies deploy these new technologies, although they drive great productivity increases, they also automate some jobs, augment other jobs and add new jobs. What those companies miss is insight about when that's going to happen and where. So they can budget, they can invest and they can make the right organisational decisions. At the government level, it's simply the same questions but a higher level of abstraction. When we think about industry change, we're seeing mass automation in some industries. We're seeing some industries change through new productivity measures that augment jobs, that add new capabilities, that add new skills. And then lastly, we're seeing whole new job categories and whole new industries emerge. Government needs greater insight as to where to invest and how to create policy to foster those sorts of outcomes.
There's been heightened awareness amongst the community when big Australian corporates like NAB's announcement of a workforce reduction of 6,000. Are we seeing the new economy kick in now?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think we're seeing job changes in every industry. Certain industries are probably ahead of that. So financial services, as you say, are certainly making major changes. NAB to automate some roles, other banks are adding others and sort of investing in new products, investing in new businesses, new ventures. I think one of the issues of this time is that we call this the future of work. This change is happening right now.
And so what does that look like over the coming 5-year period?
Well, I think technology is really, starting to ramp. So the mass deployment of AI, you couldn't say that most organisations were experimenting with AI just 2 years ago, 3 years ago. I think most are now, certainly the bigger end of town is. I think in different countries we're seeing major policy announcements, major funding announcements being made. These decisions were a long way off, even just a year or 18 months ago, and now they're quite commonplace. So I think with the advent of these technologies, the fact that they're not just being tinkered with or experimented now, they're being deployed in anger, as it were, and with government making real policy decisions around this, we're only going to see this grow.
So as these significant changes take place, where will corporates find the skilled employees to make these investments come to fruition?
Well, I think that's the key question that a lot of companies are trying to wrestle with. One of the things that our data is showing, though, is that many of the key employees of the future already work in your workforce. To give you an example, if you work in an accounting role, let's say financial accounting, financial reporting, there's a high chance of automation of many of the tasks that you do over the course of the next 5 or 10 years. So people look at accountants as an industry that's likely to be perhaps not completely automated, but certainly a much smaller industry in the future. Having said that, companies are crying out for cybersecurity analysts, for cryptocurrency analysts, for people who understand the complexities of Bitcoin or the complexities of the blockchain. And they're saying, well, where do we find these people? Our analysis shows that the tasks and skills, the capabilities, the competencies of those future people are quite often found in the accountants that are also thinking of automating. My advice to many large companies would be, don't rush to automate people that you could train into new roles, if you just had clarity around what that skill pathway looked like for those people.
What makes you feel optimistic that higher paying, higher skilled jobs will still be here in Australia in the 5-year period?
I think the conditions in Australia are very good for growth. I mean, I think we have an awful lot of capital in the system. We have government and industry that's very collaborative. There's a little bit of pushing and shoving from time to time, but everyone wants the same thing. We have a world view here. We have an export mentality. So I think there's an awful lot of positive reasons why the fourth industrial revolution in Australia could in fact be another renaissance. It doesn't need to be a revolution. It could be the birth of a whole new category of activity and work and productivity. I do have concerns, however, about the developing world. In countries that we have historically outsourced jobs to, we're now onshoring the work that we've offshored over the last 20 or 30 years. This might be business process outsourcing, call centres, for example, or the back office of major companies in India. Could be basic manufacturing, garment manufacturing, or auto assembly. These sorts of activities are prime for automation. And unfortunately, what that means is likely a very heavy impact in the developing world, which I'm not sure our regional neighbours are quite prepared for just yet.
So at that level, which economies are doing well in the race to automate?
I don't know if I would describe it as the race to automate. I think it's the race to apply these technologies. And I think the economies that stand out are those where government and industry have come together around new policy and real investment, not just pledging money, but actually starting to spend money. So many of the European countries, so the UK, France, particular leaders, South Korea, Canada, a strong leader in this area, particularly in North America. China, I mean, I don't think anybody needs to have anything explained to them about China's investment in AI, from the president down, saying this is something we want to be famous for being made in China. I think certainly many countries are really kind of ramping up in this space. It'd be nice to see Australia do a bit more in that area.
Thanks. So what's the role of education in the reskilling need that we're seeing?
Well, we often hear a lot of people, politicians, business leaders, academic leaders, talk about the need for a culture of lifelong learning or continuous education. I think this is a great goal, but I don't see a huge amount of readiness to actually deliver on that commitment. Our data, our analysis shows that millions of people will need an awful lot of skill development beginning immediately and continuing really for the next 10, 20 years and probably beyond. I don't see any level of infrastructure, funding, course content, delivery mechanisms that are yet prepared to supply that level of education demand. I don't think that's just confined to Australia. I think this whole issue of lifelong learning that we're starting to see politicians around the world really advocate for is yet to be anywhere near being able to be delivered.
So given there's always a lag in curriculum development, education programs and the like, what key tips would you give employers now to start to get ready for the reskilling need?
Well, I think learning and development in many organisations is a bit of an afterthought. It's quite a tactical exercise. It tends to be a case of, well, we've got a few $1,000s allocated for each person. They can go and do the same sort of training that we've been doing in the past. I think the use of data and the use of analytics to predict the effect of technology and the effect it will have in an organisation allows companies to get a lot more strategic about that learning and development. It means they can start bringing some of that activity in-house. They don't have to be paying ordinary kind of providers to do ordinary sort of courses. Get much more strategic, much more bespoke, much more deliberate about who goes on what courses to get what skill development. That lets them really sort of think about how they can build the overall capability of the organisation, and rather than just send people off on more project management or more communication skills training, they can do something that's much more aligned to the work they'll be doing in the future. So number one activity of companies would be to invest in understanding that pathway to future skills, what the supply and demand for jobs and labour will be in their organisation, how their market's going to change, how their industry's going to change, and then to say, okay, what skills do we need in the workforce? Who do we need to augment with new skills to drive new levels of productivity? And where do we go about finding or building that capability to deliver those new skills?
Fantastic. So the Fathom success story, you really only launched last October, so not yet 12 months into the marketplace, and yet your global reach is expanding. Would you like to share your go-to-market successes?
Yeah. Well, thank you. So, yeah, I mean, we spent nearly 18 months developing and building an AI platform. We've got 3 different machine learning units working away within the platform. We've built an awful lot of proprietary analytics. We use some third-party analytics as well. And I think really it was only when we had the first few clients, first few customers signed up and using the platform, we really felt comfortable that we were going to be successful. That success, though, we've been really delighted with how quickly things have grown. 5 months after launch, we were invited to become the first company in Australia, the second in Asia, and the 16th in the world to be a member of the World Economic Forum Centre for the Fourth Industrial Revolution. There's no one else in that group really focusing on future of work or using data to understand the Fourth Industrial Revolution. We've had major successes in North America. Google.org, which is the philanthropic arm of Google, has recently funded the world's biggest public-private innovation hub, the Mars Discovery District in Canada, to use our technology, to use the Fathom platform to create a skills development program for Canada. We've got our first European government client as a pilot for the EU. We've got companies and governments engaging with us in a dozen different countries. And on the government side, we were involved in the recent Indian economic strategy development work that the Australian government's Department of Foreign Affairs did. So I think we've shown now that there's applications for national governments on domestic policy, state level governments on what do we do with jobs and education and infrastructure, on foreign affairs, and on companies in 15 different industries. So it's been a big year.
Excellent. If there was one thing you could change at a government policy level that would help expedite Australia's digital transformation, what would that be?
There's actually two, if you don't mind me throwing in another one. I understand the nature of politics, and you know, there's a healthy debate and healthy rivalry. Every country has it, and it's a key part of democracy. Given that the issue that we're working on here, the impact of technology is so great and over such a period of time, I would look for a much more durable view of industry policy with regard to technology, something that survived the electoral cycle. And that, I think, requires the second kind of major change, which is it needs to be much more bipartisan. So something that is less political and more policy would be very welcome. Not to criticise, again, just to observe that, you know, we've had 4 or 5 different industry ministers in Australia over the last 3 or 4 years, and it just makes it tricky, I think, to actually engage with government to create policy that is durable and bipartisan.
Thanks for joining us today. We look forward to tracking Fathom's success in the future 12 months.
Thanks so much for having me. Thanks, Andrew.